Well, welcome everybody to the PFA board meeting. I'm instructed by Kirsten, we got to read this before we start. It says, due to COVID-19, the January PFA board meeting will be a virtual meeting. Individuals who wish to make comments regarding items scheduled on the agenda or wish to address the PFA board during public comment on items not specifically scheduled on the agenda must use a question and answer option within the meeting or send comments to publiccomments@pooterfire.org. Your comments, questions will be read by a monitor and answered by the board. With that out of the way, the first item on the agenda is any public comments, and
We don't have any, Dave. There are none.
There are none from your end? Okay. So then the next item on the agenda would be the consent agenda, which would include the minutes of December 15th. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
All right.
Good. The next item is the discussion item. Item number 2 would be to welcome board member Emily Gorgol. Is that how you pronounce that?
Yep, it's Gorgol.
Okay.
Yep.
Tom, would you like to do that right now?
And staff can hold up their coffee cups because we all have coffee cups. It says, I think you're on mute. Emily comes to us from the city council filling in Kristen's spot for the remainder of the term. And Emily, what I'd like to do, I guess, is to, if it's okay with you, is to open it up to you first to introduce yourself, and then probably have an introduction from Dave and Mike as other board members, and then introduce you some of the key staff that is in these meetings. So the floor is yours, I guess.
Sure, sounds great. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm excited to be part of the board and looking forward to working with you. As Tom said, I'm Fort Collins City Council. I represent District 6, which is the northwest part of Fort Collins. I'm 2 years into my first term. Just a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Fort Collins. I went to CSU and then I went to Portland State for my master's in public health. So I've been focused a lot on council on supporting working families through housing, economic mobility, environmental sustainability, and I'm really excited to be part of this. So if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them and looking forward to learning more about you all.
Welcome aboard, Emily. We look forward to working with you also.
Thank you.
Dave, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Welcome, Emily. Again, welcome. I'm Dave Pusey. I've been on the, I'm a district board member, so I'm the representative, one of the representatives from the district. And I'm a longtime board member, not as long as Mike, but been on for quite a while. I don't even know how many years now. I live north of Fort Collins in the growth area, but in the county, so that's why I'm on the district board.
All right. I'm going to, when I call out staff, if you could just turn on your camera and introduce yourself. We'll start. I know you've met Ann, but we'll jump to Kirsten. I'll just go down my screen.
Good morning, Emily. Welcome to the PFA board. I do the budget and finance for Poudre Fire Authority, and I've been here for over 30 years. So I love it. Love the people, love the work. It's awesome. So happy to have you on.
Nice to meet you, and thank you for all the deliveries.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you, Kirsten. Next on my list is Sean Williams. Sean takes our minutes. Sean.
Sean has to open her laptop to.
Oh, Okay,
That may not be as easy to do as for some folks, but
okay.
Yeah, Sean is our accounts payable and
Emily, glad you're on board. Nice to meet you.
Thank
Nice to meet you
Sean.
too.
The next on my list is Patty Forsyth.
Hi, good morning, Emily. Welcome. I'm the district board coordinator, so I'll do the packets for the district on their Monday meetings. Welcome.
The next I show is our brand new battalion chief. Make that introduction to the board. Is our brand new battalion chief, Chris Hill, who is in charge of our facilities, our health and safety. I'll let him introduce himself.
Good morning, Emily, and welcome. Thank you for having me, and thanks, Chief, for a nice welcome there. Yep, brand new battalion chief. I'm really excited. I'm learning a lot. Right now, I don't know what I don't know. So thank you to all PFA staff for working with me and helping me through this.
And I must add, that's a background that's not, he's not in a fire. He's not sitting in a bay or it'd really echo. Next up is our interim operations chief, Brandon Garcia.
Hi, good morning, Emily. Welcome board. I'm the new interim ops chief as of a few months ago, and I look forward to meeting you and getting to spend some time with you.
Next up is our division chief over community risk reduction and fire prevention, Jerry Howell.
Emily, I want to wish you a good morning as well. I look forward to meeting you in person, and congratulations.
After that would be division chief of support services, Rick Vandervelde, or Vandy.
Morning, Emily. Welcome. A pleasure to have you and look forward to working alongside you.
Next is our planning and analysis chief, who oversees our accreditation processes, but also how we track our outcomes and our data, is Battalion Chief Sean Jones.
Good morning, Emily. Go Rams. Glad to have you on board and looking forward to working with you.
Up next is our deputy fire marshal, and just immediately has just moved out of the planning and analysis position as Battalion Chief Ron Sims.
I'm in my new office trying to get used to new stuff that I'm finding. But it's a pleasure to meet you, Emily, and thank you for your service to the community. Very much appreciated.
I thought we were going to a romper room minute there for a minute. Next up is our battalion chief over emergency medical services, is Kevin Waters.
Good morning. Struggling with tech this morning. Nice to meet you, Emily.
And our public outreach is Annie Bierbauer.
Good morning, Emily. How are you? It's good to see you again. We got to work together a little bit back in my city days, but yeah, just happy to have you as part of the board and really look forward to working with you and seeing more of you.
Emily, we have stolen a number of city people. It happens.
Next up is my admin, Connie Iverson. She might be busy. Our GIS analyst, Laura Robinson, who is very much a critical part of where we're putting our fire stations and future services.
Good morning. It's nice to meet you. I've been with a PFA for about 1.5 years. I come from a large fire district outside of Portland where I worked for 12 years. So nice to meet you.
Yeah, we're having all these old relations back to college. From our HR department, Greg Greaves.
Good morning, Emily. Welcome aboard.
Our HR director, Janet Miller, who you may know from her city days. She's another one who came over from the city, is out at our training center working with a promotional process for captains. And then finally, the operations side admin is Tammy Salisbury. So I think she's probably toiling away as well and has this running. So anyway, that's the staff, that's the common staff, and just so you know, Emily, that our meetings are structured to where we will call on these staff members to answer questions throughout the meeting if it falls in their area. So no, Janet's coming on now. So but welcome, and we're excited to have you here. A lot's happening at the PFA, so obviously, and we're ready to go.
Great. Thank you so much for taking the time for introductions, and it was really nice meeting everyone.
Very good. Well, welcome everybody to the meeting, and let's move forward. On the next item would be the Poudre Fire Authority Board Agenda Planning Calendar. Tom, do you have anything to add to the calendar, or is there anything you want to bring up?
I don't. Just a reminder, we have the February 4th meeting, executive session that you all will be attending. I don't think I will probably be at that for the chief hiring. I don't know what the plans are in my position on that, but somebody will let me know. We have that all the way through the April meeting. And then the other key thing is we are on the schedule now for the annual report on May 11th, the joint meeting between council and the district. Last year we did that in Zoom world, hoping that maybe we can have some COVID successes by May, and we can possibly get the two boards together. And also that will probably be a great time to introduce to council and the community the new fire chief. Seeing if the board has, I know that we're pretty intensive on hiring a fire chief as far as our agenda right now. See if the board has anything else they'd like to see on the agenda.
Mike, I was thinking that we should add Sean in to talk about the work plan. He said he'd have that in a couple of months, maybe next month, I think. So I think that'll be something to add.
We'll see. How about Davis, when it comes to that part of the meeting today, we can talk to Sean about when he can have that, and we'll make sure that shows up on the planning agenda next, or planning calendar next meeting.
Sounds good.
I'm sorry, Tom, is this I missed the first part. This is the joint meeting?
No, Dave's talking about the work plan for because from yesterday, Chief Jones gave a report that he's going to give to you here in a little bit on our accreditation recommendations.
Okay.
And our work plan for that. So just to make sure that's on the calendar, because right now it's kind of blank, and they'll be working with staff and with the board to assure that that is the direction we want to go on those recommendations.
Okay, my apologies.
Anybody else have any suggestions on the planning calendar? I guess we'll accept a motion then to accept that planning calendar for the 2021 calendar year.
Do we need a motion on that, or don't we just do it?
We don't usually have a motion on that one. Yeah, it changes during the year, so.
So do you think we do need one in, Kristen?
No, you don't, Mike.
Okay, very good. Then let's move on to staff report on 2020 accreditation report and recommendations update. Tom, can you do that?
Yeah, so I'm going to turn this over to Chief Jones, who is here to talk about our recent accreditation. And thank you. It's a month ago that we went through that, or actually a little over a month ago now. And I was very pleased with how that meeting went. It took 10 minutes to get our site team leader on, so we had about a 10-minute meeting with the board. That's because we had Chief Sims along with Chief Jones and with Laura Robinson and Haley Spurrier, who are the folks that really lead that, had us prepared. And what Sean's going to go through is our recommendations, and I'm really pleased. I think the recommendations really align with what we're trying to do at the PFA right now in the form of continuous improvement. So it's a good news item, but now the work begins to get us ready for what we can do to improve. So I'm going to turn it over to Chief Jones, who's been in the role now a couple of months and is still drinking from the fire hose.
That would be accurate. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate the intro. And really what I want to do this morning, first of all, is congratulations again to the board and to all of PFA. I mean, you guys had a unique ringside seat for the process last month, and to see the outcome be such good news is really worth celebrating for all of us. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Is everybody seeing that?
Yes.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is this is really a brief high-level overview of the recommendations that were presented to the PFA during the site visit. Okay, so from the peer team site visit, they provided us in their final report with 18 recommendations for us to work on over the coming years, over the course of the cycle. The cycle is 5 years long before we will present ourselves again in front of the commission for accreditation status again. Basically, in my role and with my team, planning and analysis will develop a work plan, and with these recommendations, assign each of those to the appropriate division or program area for implementation. So that's the piece that I'm working on right now. These 18 recommendations and these are kind of my own general categories as I look through them, can be broken down into these areas. 2 of them were response related. 10 of them were really process improvement. 2 of them were specific towards training, and then another 4 were focused on health and safety measures. Really, I think the big takeaway I would like you all to come away with is that these recommendations are opportunities for continuous improvement, which is really why we do this accreditation process to begin with. Nothing in these recommendations should set off alarm bells or red flags as we're not doing something right or we're missing the boat in any way. So these really are just areas for improvement. Kind of a blank screen here, but I just wanted to show you, this is the work plan template that I'm going to be filling in. So each of those recommendations will be geared towards a specific program area. That category manager will be named. We'll have a proposed work plan timeline for completion. And then one thing that we've added to the work plan over the last one, which you'll see in a moment, is we'll track the completion. So we kind of have a running status and kind of a status dashboard that we'll be working from. So here's this filled out plan is actually from 2015. It just kind of gives you an idea of what you're looking at. So it shows the category under which the recommendation was made, who is assigned to it, kind of a rough work plan, and then the proposed timeline for completion. One thing I did want to point out is that while the recommendation work plan is still being worked on and completed, we have not been sitting idle as an organization. There are actually several recommendations that action have already been taken on, some of which you're already familiar with. One of the key ones in a response profile is identifying both short and long-term elements to improve call processing and turnout time. So those are things that we are working on both internally with our folks, but also the call processing, something that we're working with our partners at FC 911. We're also, again, with our partners at FC 911, working on the EMD dispatch, which is emergency medical dispatching. That's something that you've heard Chief Sims talk about in the past, where it does somewhat slow down our call processing, but it also ensures that we're getting the right resources out into the system for any particular call. There needs to be a balance in that, and that was something that the peer team wanted to make sure that we just continue to monitor that, which we are. We are identifying formal training for both our health and safety officer, which is Captain Hampton, and specifically we've identified training for any captain that's going to operate on a emergency scene in the role of incident safety officer. So those things are already happening. We're already getting the training lined out, and then we're going to start plugging folks into that later this quarter or later this year. And then final, the one that you guys are certainly aware of is that we're increasing the frequency of our physical evaluations from every 3 years to every year for our line personnel. So that is already in process. Chief Hill is working on, based on the board's recommendations and going through an RFP. That work is already happening. So wheels are moving, which is exciting. And I will continue to once the work plan is out, and as Dave pointed out, I'll bring this to the board. Dave, I'm probably going to hedge my bet, and rather than next month, I'd probably say let's plan on me presenting that in March, just so that I know I have a buffer. So I'll be communicating that with you all as well as the entire organization. So there's a real clear, transparent communication on what we're tackling, why, and how we plan to get it done. So with that, I thank you for your time and happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions from the board members regarding the report?
Mike, I just have not a question, a comment. I appreciate the update. It's good to see that we're already beginning operationalizing the recommendations, and you know, Sean, welcome aboard. And I just appreciate the sort of the quick response back as to kind of how we're moving forward. So, and I have great confidence in the PFA and beginning to operationalize these. So just want to share my appreciation.
Thank you.
And I would share with the board on the recommendation that the board had on our recommendation, actually the board's request to go to RFP for the fitness and health evaluations. And as he said, Chris Hill is working on that. We met with labor last week and discussed that, and we will have employee input in that process to make sure that we are dialing in. But the good news is there's also national standards that say what those physicals should look like in FPA 1582 and 1584 that we can reference in designing that RFP. So I really appreciate that from the board, because that makes sure that we get the highest quality. Because as I said, I think last month, the three real big killers of firefighters, and yes, we still kill people on the fire ground traumatically, but the Westminster Fire Department just had a line of duty death this week on Sunday of a occupationally related cancer. And so if we can do early cancer screening for people who are exposed to carcinogens, we can do early cardiac screening and early mental health screening. Those are the three biggies right now that we know are kind of hidden from a lot of folks that are causing firefighters to lose their life or to have to retire early. We really want to focus on that. And so I'm really enthused by this recommendation and getting people through that every year. Our goal is to keep everybody healthy and so they can have a nice, healthy retirement after being here for a while.
Well, I think the fact that so few recommendations validates the quality of the organization, and I think we should be very proud of what the staff has done to make those accomplished results. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.
Anyone else have any other questions regarding the accreditation report? Very good. Well, thanks again, staff. You did a great job. So let's move to the item 7 or 5, the discussion items, the ethical standards, Poudre Fire Authority Board of Directors and Fire Chief.
So Ann Turnquist is here. This is one of the things that came out of accreditation is that we do a periodic review of the board's ethical standards. And since we adopted those and the chiefs at the same time and bringing on a new fire chief, I think it's good for discussion for the board that we have those in place as we make this transition. So Ann, you're up.
Okay. So one of the requirements of accreditation is that you periodically review all of your governing documents and make sure they're up to date. And so this is just one of those routine items that nothing in particular prompted, other than it's been since 2014. So we had a quick look, had the attorney look it over, and the state had updated some of the underlying statutes that relate to this code of ethics and ethical standards and principles. And so we checked to make sure that none of those changes that came from the state had changed. And the attorney said, no, we're good. Everything still is properly cited, and there haven't been any any changes to the underlying statutes. So all we've done here is update the dates and change it from adopting to reaffirming in the title of the resolution, and brought it back to you to have you have a look and make sure you're still good with the standards. And if you are, then we'd be looking for adoption of the two resolutions that adopt or reaffirm the code for the board, and then a separate one for the chief. The chief's code is based on the oh, Tom, I've lost the name of it. The chief.
It's basically it's almost word for word from the International Association of Fire Chiefs.
Yes.
They make that available to fire chiefs for adoption. And that's where we got that in 2014.
Yeah. So there's no change in the content, just in the titling and the dates. If you have any questions or comments or changes you want to suggest, we'd be happy to either make those or work with the attorney if there's something you have questions about.
Mike, just real quickly, having a chance to review these, both the board's sort of policy and the chief, I think it's a good reminder. I think they're still very relevant. And, I did have some questions. One of the things that what I like what Mayor Troxel has always said, and he's in a complex environment at the university where professors and faculty and staff regularly have conflicts. So, the way he's sort of shared with me over the 14 years that I've worked with him and 6 years as mayor is that a conflict isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, that happens in these environments that we're in. It's really how to manage the conflict that is really the important part. So, I think about when I was reading the materials, Tom, one of the things that helped me think through is, even as a CPSI board member, as a Center for Public Safety Excellence board member, and going through the accreditation process to make sure that I disclose that as a CIP board member and as a PFA board member and as the city manager, there's often times where there's sort of an overlap, and we just need to be very intentional and disclose those when there are overlaps. So having said all that, one of the things that I know as a city manager, and I know city council members on an annual basis provide sort of disclosure statements. What other boards are they part of? What are some of the interests that they have in the community? And I think what it does is it brings transparency to, are you on other boards of directors, and things like that. And I've noticed at PFA, we don't do financial disclosures that way. And I don't mean credit card balances and things like that, but we do disclose, our mortgages, the properties that we own, the boards that we may sit on. So I might that was a question as I was re-reviewing these materials this year, thinking, wonder if we should do something like that. But my bottom line of my comment is I think it's always good to do a refresher. I think because when we get this wrong, it really can undermine the relationship that we have with the public. I also know that there's oftentimes, there's legal conflicts of interest, and then there's perceived conflicts of interest. And I think that's also a really important standard. If a resident that lives a block away could perceive there to be a conflict of interest, then oftentimes codes of ethics actually speak to that as well. So again, those are just some thoughts that occurred while I was re-reviewing these materials last night. I think Poudre Fire Authority deals with conflict of interest well. I think we have a great history. And so everything that I've said has nothing to do with a criticism, but maybe an area where we can even improve further. So that would be my 2 cents. Oh, and by the way, also I noticed that you can't receive significant gifts. And I'm hoping that the chief's annual peanut brittle packet is not considered a significant gift. In my household, it's cherished, but I don't think.
Well, that could be a problem, Darren. We may have to write that into the contract of the next chief.
Exactly, exactly.
It's
what I'm
highly valuable.
I think I already have plans to make deliveries next December. So, so Emily, I don't know if I ever got any to council since you've been on council, but that's my Christmas tradition is to make up some pecan brittle. It was something my grandpa taught me many, many years ago.
Hey, Darren, let me understand what you're saying specifically. Are you saying that each of us would write down what other outside activities we have and submit it to the board, or, you know, a formal conflict, we have to go to the Secretary of State, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So Dave, I guess I was just sharing that on several boards, and I'm not on the city council, obviously, but I am required to provide a disclosure statement to the clerk's office. And I suspect that that's state law that drives that. It could be our city charter. I can easily find out and I can easily get those materials to Ann and Tom. But Dave, I'm not necessarily advocating for it. I just think that disclosure and transparency is always, it's, you know, better to err on that side.
Sure.
The process that the city goes through is it's not I don't think overburdensome or cumbersome. And then we also have a protocol, Dave, for when there is a conflict of interest, when you think there could be, how do you deal with that? So you know, I just bring that, I bring it to this board, not necessarily, you know, hard advocacy, but maybe it's something that we're trying to continuously improve. Maybe it's something that we consider.
Sure.
Darren, this is Mike. That becomes on file with the city clerk?
It does, Mike, yes. Yeah.
I don't ever recall anybody asking about our backgrounds or standards or anything else since I've been on the board, but would be nice to maybe see what you guys provide, and if something that we might want to do as a prerequisite for board membership. I don't know. It's not a bad idea.
Why don't I just do that as maybe I'll either I'll send over or ask our city clerk to send over, and I'll better understand the basis for it, whether it's state law, the charter, or local ordinance. And then I'll just share that and ask Tom to share that with the board, and then you know, we go from there.
I'll just add that. Oh, go ahead, Ken.
You know, I think the reason that you know, amendment, 40, 41, whatever, you know, it has some guidelines, but, you know, I think the reason for special districts, even like, and then like PFA, is that our area of policy making or decision making isn't as diverse as like a city council could be, or a state legislature, or a body that deals with, you know, broader issues. You know, although we do deal with some of the, you know, application of, you know, fire codes and reviewing documents from, you know, builders and that sort of thing. So, I mean, you know, there's some, you know, I think it's always better to do maybe, you know, more than less, you know, from that standpoint, but just as a little bit of perspective, I think that's why maybe it hasn't been as much a part of PFA and special districts like it is for city council.
Yeah, I was just going to add that the city council in depth, because you have to disclose like if you have any loans and who administers your loans and your property and things like that. But the Housing Catalyst, the other board I serve on, it's a little lighter. You just disclose if you serve on other boards and employment, which could be a conflict of interest. So it just has a few, and I I can send that one as well if that would help add to the collection. But I do think it's helpful to disclose those things up front, in case so it's out in the public rather than kind of reactively. So if that would help, I can send the Housing Catalyst ethics agreement as well.
Well, that would probably be good. And since it looks like we're slowly moving out of the COVID restrictions, that this might be worthy of an in-house board meeting that we can discuss the pros and cons of all of this and see where we land and make a formal declaration from the board.
Mike, I just got a text from Patty saying that I have one filed for the district. I didn't remember that, but maybe you do too. I don't know. We may have done it in the district.
I was going to say, I think there may be, we may not need to do this in your underlying positions as district board members or city council members. You may have already done the disclosures that you need to do, but I can check in with Dino Ross, our attorney, and see if he's got any thoughts to share about this as well.
What I was going to say, it sounds like council already has this in place for Emily and Ken and even to Darren. I think it might be an issue that we need to take up on the district board to ensure that. And I know we did this at the same time in 2014 with the district board. We went through our last ethics go around to review this stuff. So maybe that's something we need to put on the district board agenda to make sure that we've got our I's dotted and T's crossed as far as special district law, and coordinate that with Bob Cole.
Chief, if I can just add to that when we get our new electors and we swear them in, their disclosure is given to them, and then they turn around and provide it back to me that I file with the state.
Okay.
As soon as they return it. So I had one for Landon, for Dave, for Tess, everyone that might serve on other boards is disclosed right when I administer the oath. I just wanted you to know.
Okay, so I think we've got maybe a little administrative work to make sure that we've got all our I's dotted and T's crossed, and then we have that covered, if that makes sense to the board.
It makes sense, Tom, and maybe we could have a report for the next board meeting.
We can do that.
Covered, so.
Mike, I have another suggestion if we're done with that subject. On the chief's code of ethics, as I read through it, there's a comment in there. It's on page 62 about the chief abiding with all campaign rules when supporting political candidates and engaging in political activities. And I got thinking about that, and not only in terms of myself, but also the new chief coming on and say, well, what are those rules? And I thought it might be worthwhile to cite the actual Colorado CFR.
So you're talking about like Colorado Fair campaign practices and.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Ann, when we went through this, I know you reminded us all of what the rules were. So, but I wouldn't have known them otherwise. And I'm thinking of a new chief reading this, thinking, well, what does that mean? And if you cite the law, then maybe, we can get specific. Just a suggestion.
Okay.
And I will say this, if I was staying on, I would probably have this structured more. I'd have to look into what Darren has as a city manager, but I think it needs to make a statement of the chief being apolitical because of the 12 different elected officials that the chief works for. And something that I don't know that you would actually say apolitical, but something that makes that statement.
I think those are really good suggestions, and we ought to probably make sure that our recruiter is making candidates aware of some of these standards that we're looking at so that they know where we're coming from. Man, I don't know if that's something that we should do right away.
We've had a conversation with the recruiter about some of this because one of the people who applied for the job kind of got crossways with his city council because they had a different standard. And we did have a conversation about what the expectation is here. But changing this standard is not a bad thing. We could certainly beef this up a bit and bring it back to you next month if you'd like to, on the chief. If you're okay with the board, we could certainly tweak the chief one a little bit, and it might be very timely.
I think it might be, especially we're right in the middle of the recruitment process. They all the candidates surely need to be aware where we're coming from. What's the board think about that?
I agree, Mike.
Yeah, I do as well.
Yeah, that's good.
We can do that. We can either bring both back to you next time, or just bring the chief one back next time. It's up to you. There's no time sensitivity to this, so doing it next month is perfectly fine.
Yeah, and I think probably the more critical one would be the chief, since we're right in the middle of that process.
And back on the ethics for the board, I don't know, Darren, whether your thoughts would suggest that we change the ethics there. So for our disclosures, or what are you thinking?
Well, again, I think by the question, I've already learned that, the district's doing that, and I'm assuming that maybe PFA has a connection to the city. I think we should be more explicit about it. So I think if we can, as PFA, we can pull in the city board reps disclosures. I think that's great. And then if the district's already doing that, I would verify that those are just done once a term versus annually. Ours are renewed annually. Those are managed by the clerk's office. But it sounds like we're already doing indirectly what I was asking. And if we can somehow have those available, upon request for inspection, I think we're covered. Then I think the issue is, really, do we have a protocol? And this is really an accreditation question. Maybe, do we have a protocol for conflicts and how to manage conflicts? And again, conflicts aren't bad. They just have to be managed appropriately. And so do we have a protocol for that? And then, maybe rather, we're probably not going to solve these things here. Maybe what we do is we set aside a conversation at a coming board meeting where we talk about what's the collective interest of the board. Those are just some thoughts that I had last night in reading the packet. So I don't want to derail our agenda. I've already said way too much, but, if we want to do a little bit of collecting of information, what are other best practices in our industry, and then come back and maybe have a board conversation about it. I'd be supportive of that. And again, I want to say, just for the record, I'm not overly concerned about any of this related to this topic. I think PFA does a fine job. It's really about, are we sort of, as a board, from a transparency standpoint, leading? And that's my only question.
We should hold up on both of them. That's what I'm hearing.
Fine. Yeah, I will touch base with Dino and see if he's got any specific suggestions on maybe it's an addition to the board's standards as well, that says, and once a year we'll collect the disclosures from the city and the district, or something like that. But we'll look into it and bring this back for next month.
That'd be good.
That's awesome.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other questions regarding this item? Very good. Then we'll move forward to item 6, chief selection process update and planning process.
Again, right back at Ann.
All right, back at Ann.
And Janet Miller has joined us too. So I know they've worked together a bit on this, but I'll turn that over to Ann. Okay.
Poor Janet's working on battalion chiefs, captains, and firefighters all at the same time as well. So it's been a busy few months here at admin division. So as you know, we've got a meeting scheduled for next Thursday with the recruiter. On Friday this week, you're going to get the portfolios of their top 11, what I'm hearing now is 11 or 12 candidates that they want to review with you. So they'll send those written materials this Friday. You'll have a few days to look them over. And then on Thursday, the 4th, we have a meeting scheduled with the recruiter, a virtual meeting with the recruiter to go over those portfolios and try and narrow the list down somewhat to what we would probably call a semifinal pool. So our plan overall is to schedule those first round interviews with the board around about the week of the 15th. We don't have a specific date in mind, but we'll get to work on scheduling that if that's how the board wants to do it. I'm suggesting we do that by Zoom for this first round. And then later in February, we have a more thorough process and involving more people once we narrow it down to maybe 5 or fewer final candidates. If you remember when we talked to the attorney about this process, he reminded us that final interviews between the board and executive candidates for an executive position have to be done in public. So that's going to be a process we're going to want to keep in mind for the final interview between the board and the final candidates. And so that'll also be a scheduling issue. We want to make sure we figure out a system that allows for that public engagement.
And that's just for the final candidates, Ann? That's not for this interim interview? This first
Right,
interview?
not for the semifinals.
That one can be, because I
Right.
worry about losing candidates that might not
Right.
have it disclosed yet.
Right. The other thing that that is required in hiring for this type of position is that we do disclose the names of finalists publicly. So that's something we'll want to keep in mind as we approach the final decision process. We have to be to the point where those candidates want to be disclosed as well, that they've informed their boards or their city councils or their city managers or whoever they're working for about their interview status. So we'll have to keep all those things in mind as we work through this. So, well, first of all, are there any questions about this next step that's going to happen in the next week? Okay. As you know, Tom and I have both looked through the list of candidates, and we've got a really good list here. So I'm really excited about you getting to look at these folks. The headhunter has been doing screening interviews with the top tier candidates, and he's telling us the same thing, that this is a good group. And so that's a great position for you all to be in, is to have good choices. He's going to bring those to us in sort of a 2-tiered way. He's got his top tier. This is in this group that he's going to bring next week. His top tier, and then a next tier, depending on how many stay in the process, what you think about them. So we'll let him work through that with you on the 4th. So we've got some questions that I don't necessarily have to answer today, but we probably should be ready to answer by the 4th. So I wanted to have a little bit of discussion with you today about process. We don't want to talk about anything specific like questions or anything like that, because this is a public meeting. We don't want anybody to get an unfair advantage by having heard questions bandied about or anything like that, but we do want to talk a little bit about process. And I guess the first question is, for that semifinal interview, that'll be around the middle of February, are you guys comfortable with those being virtual interviews?
I would say yes on the first round.
I'm okay with virtual.
I am as well, Ann.
Okay. And I know, Darren, you've done some of these, some executive search even during COVID, and I think you've done some of it virtually, haven't you?
Yes, we have. Yeah, and the city council has, I think about the municipal court judge appointment process, that was a virtual process. So I think it, you know, it is what it is, but I think these processes can be very, very done well. So yeah, no concerns on my part.
All right.
Other board members okay with that? Ken and Emily?
Yeah, that's fine.
My next question on my list is, for this level of interviews, this first round, are all the board members going to participate, or are we going to do a subcommittee? We had previously talked about a committee of the whole, and I want to make sure that's still true.
I would hope we continue as a board of the. I don't know if there's any reason to subcommittee this. I'd yield to whatever the feeling of the board is. I think it's important that the whole board be involved in that, in the screening process.
I agree wholeheartedly with what Mike just said. I think I would definitely support that.
Me too.
Okay, seeing head nodding. And I'm proposing this as the first round be board only to narrow down the candidates, rather than bring in stakeholders and doing a dog and pony show. And I want to make sure that that makes sense to you before I make that assumption. Does that make sense to have the first round interviews just be the board and not staff or community or anything like that?
I agree with that. And I'm answering affirmatively because it's awkward when there's silence, right? And Mike may not have access to videos. So I do support that approach, Ann.
Okay. Nodding heads.
Yep.
Okay. Mike, I don't know about you since I don't see your.
Am I not showing up? What is
No, your camera's not on.
Oh, hell, I didn't know that.
Where's tech support when you need her?
Why it's going so well.
You didn't need to comb your hair after all.
We don't have to look at you, Mike, all meeting.
Yeah,
It's been a very smooth meeting.
I got to figure out how to do this. So, but what, you know, one of the things that we need to really think about as a board, and I don't know what the process would be, is that I think we need to be prepared as we move forward on this, is the whole benefit package. Are we going to do any housing requirement payments or assistance, and what are we talking about in terms of potential salaries? And I don't know when we get that kind of discussion started, but certainly before we get too far down that road, we need to have some dialogue, I would think.
Well, we did have some discussion with the headhunter when we met with him or them a couple of months ago and narrowed down the salary range. I'm sure that there'll be questions and issues going forward. We have provided him information for the candidates about our benefit package, our pension plan options. We did not talk about things like relocation or any of that. So that's probably premature, but I think the headhunter will lead us through that process as well, and can help us with the negotiating with a final choice. It's what we hire them to do, is help us through that bit, since we don't do that every day. So. All right, so I'm hearing we're okay this being board only at this point, but we'll bring others in at a later stage. And then my last question about those semifinal interviews is the week of February 15th generally a reasonable week, or are people out of town, or any big things that we're going to have to work around, or can I start trying to schedule? This will be a long day or possibly 2 half days to get through, depending on how many candidates you narrow it down to on the 4th.
I'm gonna go get my calendar. I'll be back.
Okay.
And there's a national holiday that Monday. Shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, so Darren's available.
So I'm available.
So that might not be a bad day.
He doesn't have to do his regular job, so he can.
I'm just looking quickly at our city calendar, and it doesn't look like there are major conflicts but Emily and Ken can speak for themselves, but
I'd be willing to cancel our city council meeting on the 16th if we need.
Wait a minute, that's Valentine's week, right?
Well, you're after Valentine's. It's the 15th. You're a day late.
Oh, I'm a day late.
Well, it's a whole week of celebration at your house, isn't it, Darren?
That was my point, Ann. Thank you.
Yeah, there you go.
Wow. Getting that. No, I mean, you asked the question. My calendar looks good. I mean, it is so.
We'll work with your admin on that piece. But I just wanted to make sure there weren't any major, that's our ski weekend, whatever, or.
Yeah, City
Council Thursday.
Right, City
Thursday.
Council on a break. Just kidding, Emily and Ken.
Okay. Thanks. I hate to work through all these logistical things this way, but at least you're all here. So moving on to the final interviews, several questions. I think what we're envisioning and what I've talked to the search firm about is that we plan on several panels of stakeholders for the final interviews. And so I'm looking for feedback from you all about what you'd like that to look like, who you might want to engage in that process. So we can start to build those panels and make some plans for who to include in that. Some of the suggestions would include other district board members, not as an interview panel, but including them as stakeholders, community members, peer fire chiefs, possibly, employees, and the senior leadership team are all folks that we'd suggest you would consider involving in this. One of the things that we watched in Darren, in your process of hiring a deputy city manager, was the virtual meet and greet, for lack of a better word, that you did for your employees. I'm interested in that process and how you feel like that went. For the other board members, what they did was they had, I think there were 4 or 5 candidates. Oh, there's Mike.
There we go.
They had 4 or 5 candidates, and they posed them questions. This was all on Zoom. Posed them questions. They went around and answered the questions, and employees were able to watch that and pose questions themselves. And I think it gave a real good feel for who are these folks. And I think that might be a good way to engage our employees. If they're interested, they could watch that either live or recorded. So that might be an idea we want to steal from how the city has dealt with the Zoom world. Since we're not going to stand around a party room and shake hands with 100 people. It's a way of trying to recreate that idea virtually for the people who are going to be interested. So I'm interested in what you want to, what you're leaning towards, and we don't have to decide this today. If you want to talk about it and think about it, we could still talk about this again on the 4th, but I wonder if you have any thoughts.
Any comments from the board?
And I like the idea of a Zoom forum for colleagues at PFA. I also like the idea of Zoom forums for the community. Zoom forums also give access to some people who previously come to some of those forums, so you could get a different crowd, and I think that's important. So everything that you've said, Ann, resonates for me, and I appreciate the fact that you've done some work and some research on this, but and you've also, you and Janet both have had a lot of exposure to how we've done these over the years at the city as well. What you're saying makes complete sense to me, and then maybe have opportunities for people to chime in other ways directly to board members, to their council members, to however they would normally do that. I think it's a great opportunity to include voices that haven't been included in the past, and so being intentional about that would be really good. We have some resources that might be very helpful in our sustainability office that could help with connecting. Candidly, I think that's something that Emily brings to the board that she could add some really value in helping with that as well. So I like the idea of having other partners, some of our durable partners that we work with regularly, like healthcare and like the university. And I don't know, I mean, we could over design and have, lots and lots and lots of participation, but if it's managed well, I think we can do it, and we'll see it that, a more robust process will give us better results. So I'm actually, really confident that you're on all of this. So I just, those are, I guess, my initial feedback.
Any other comments?
I would just echo Darren and agree with the virtual formats and having one for staff and then a community one as well. Thinking about how do we reach folks that we normally wouldn't during this process, and kind of how do we relay the importance of participating and helping select this position. So I think, especially outside of Fort Collins and in the more rural areas, how are we communicating that to the communities as well, would be important, I think.
So looking for ways to publicize those Zoom opportunities. Okay. Okay, so we'll work on trying to figure some of that out. Anything else about the community engagement? We can put together a process and bring it back to you for your approval and input on additional what we didn't think about. On the final interviews that we do, how do you feel about doing those in person and bringing candidates to town and setting something up in a socially distant way? It's hard to imagine not having those candidates face to face for finalists, but I guess I'm interested in your thoughts. And so we're talking about late February, early March to be having some small number, whether it's 2, 3, 4, whatever number is the finalist number, and having them come to town. And we may still be doing Zoom things for the community and employees, but how do you feel about seeing the whites of their eyes?
Well, I prefer to be able to meet in person with our final candidates. The breakdown on the selection process to narrow it down is okay by Zoom, but I really personally would like to meet and talk with these candidates in person. That's my position.
I agree.
Especially if the COVID stuff is starting to diminish like it appears to be doing.
I agree.
Okay.
Hey, those of you who have your shots.
And even if you don't, it doesn't matter. You still need to wear a mask and keep social distancing. So
That's true, right?
You're just waiting. The earlier you get your shot, the longer you wait for the rest of us.
Yeah.
I would have some concerns about people asking people to travel during this time and what their comfort is with that. No, I think we can have it open to meeting in person, but I would really say that we should watch what's happening, and if things are trending in the wrong direction, we would need to move it virtually. But I don't know if we can check. You know, I think some people are uncomfortable with traveling right now, and asking someone to get on a plane may not be the best idea. So I'm open to it, but hesitant to having people travel.
If they're a fire chief, I assume they're going to be, if they're interviewing for a fire chief position, I assume they know how to, if they don't know how to apply safety protocols, we probably shouldn't be interviewing them.
That's a good point, Dave, or Ken.
So we could tentatively plan on this being in person. And then we'll be flexible. It's easier to say, to pull back and say, no, stay home, we'll do this by Zoom, than to say, we're going to do it by Zoom and then change our minds later. I think that's probably the safer way to plan is.
Yeah, no, that's right. It's always easier to, make a change at the last minute or something than to just assume that it's not going to work out.
Okay. I would also.
Can I ask you a question before we go?
Yeah.
Before we leave that, if they have to be in public, what do? We go to the Lincoln Center or something? And that's pretty awkward, I think.
I guess what I'm thinking is we do, even if they're in town, we do Zoom for the community meeting.
Well, what we did last time, we didn't have Zoom when I was interviewed, but we did we set up to whatever capacity we could hold, and you could do that too with social distancing and stuff in the boardroom, and then we broadcast it over channel 14 and our teleconference to the stations, and made it a public meeting. So I think you could probably do it in the boardroom and do it over Zoom or some fitting technology.
Well, the public would not be in attendance, but they would be they could attend by Zoom. Is that what you're saying, Tom?
That's what I'm envisioning. Yeah.
Okay.
Because even if we're significantly better, we're still not going to want to invite 50 or 100 people, even in March, I don't think. Not that I think we're going to get 100 people, but we're in the midst of planning a wedding right now, and we're thinking 50 is a big number for the kids to be planning on this spring. So,
I don't know why we couldn't use the council chambers from that standpoint.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Oh, good, Ken. Yeah.
We could have the board and the council dais, and then we could have the candidates. I mean, if we're only having 3, my goodness, they could be like 10 feet apart. And so I think there's a way to, arrange that.
Sure. Okay.
And
that's a good idea.
My take on your question, a year ago, I would have thought it would be completely unacceptable to not meet with someone directly to appoint them for an executive position like this. I couldn't have fathomed not having had a chance to meet, and on and on and on. And I've learned a lot in the last year. I think that there are people, probably fire chiefs as well, that have some real trepidation around traveling. But maybe not. I think designing the system so that we can kind of be nimble as we get closer. What I found is we've narrowed down candidates down to one, let's say, a preferred candidate, and they come out and we have a chance to meet. I mean, when we hired Kyle as the deputy city manager, I had never met him personally. Well, I shouldn't say that. He was the finalist. He actually came to Fort Collins because he wanted to sort of see the community as well before he accepted moving 1,000 miles away. And then at that point we met and we were physically distanced and all that sort of thing. So, I'm not opposed to narrowing down to the candidate and then having maybe a face-to-face conversation, but I think as long as we can ensure that people are physically distanced and I'm okay with that. But I think Emily's point about some people, I don't think it ought to be a disadvantage for someone if they're not excited about getting on an airplane right now. whether they're in the medical emergency field or not, I think. So I like the way you've outlined it. I think anticipating a site visit, whether that's 3 candidates or 1 candidate, I think we play it by ear and customize it when we find out who those people are and see what the best plan is. But having been through several final decisions in a virtual kind of way, which I never believed I would support, I actually feel very good about having been through those processes.
We can, we could check, but by that time, I mean, these are first responder kind of positions. I would assume that by then they'll have their second vaccine shot.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. And I would think by that time, most of us would have had 1 or 2 shots. So, whatever.
Yeah. All right. Well, what I'm hearing is be nimble.
Yeah, let's be nimble, and Tommy, be prepared to extend your tenure till we get everything worked out. All right.
I'm here, man.
Okay, man. That's what I was hoping. We can wait until this thing goes away and then.
That's right. We could just make a motion to delay Tom's retirement until next year.
Right.
It's time.
I might suggest that Mike's suggestion was a playful suggestion, because there may be candidates who are watching this board meeting wondering if that may be.
No.
I think we're serious about this recruitment, and Tom's going to stay until I think the day in which the new chief shows up, right, Tom? And then you're ready to go.
He's going to show up until the new chief shows up, or March 1st, whichever is sooner.
I know I plan to be here for a change of command, and any overlap the board would desire with the new chief. We talked about that a little bit yesterday at the district meeting. If the board would like some overlap to discuss governance and how this authority model works, because we do have candidates that are coming from, in all seriousness, that coming from states that have joint powers authorities, which is a little different than the authority statutes of the state of Colorado, to kind of describe the governance. Depending on, it's kind of a game time decision for y'all when the new chief gets here.
All right. I don't want to belabor this, but what I'm taking away is be nimble, lean towards in-person if we can at the final stage, but it's not a deal killer if we can't, if things just don't allow it. We'll continue planning accordingly. One of my questions was also too, is there anything major that we need to work around in late February or early March for that week of final interview? It'll probably be only a part of a day, but for you all. But anything major that we need to plan around, if you can let me know, that would be great. I don't need to know right now, but it's a ways out. But just to have that in your mind that's when we would likely be doing a final round.
Week of March 1st, is that what you said, Ann?
Early March.
Okay.
All right, so we'll keep plugging along on that. You'll get some materials via email on Friday from the search firm, so keep an eye out for that. I think probably it sounds like it will be PDFs of written materials from the candidates, and then some summary information from the search firm on each of the ones that he wants you to review. And then we'll have the executive session to discuss those candidates on the 4th. So we'll plan on that being a virtual meeting, and it will be an executive session because we will be talking about individual candidates. So that's all I have on that subject, unless somebody else has other feedback or questions. Or
Thanks for all your work, you and Janet. Appreciate it.
This is the fun stuff.
Yeah.
I do this over putting in a new pension plan every day of the year.
Well, if there's no other questions, let's move on to item 7, memorandum of agreement on the training center. And looks like you're still on go, Ann.
Is that okay with you, Tom?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. We talked about this a number of months ago when it was in a little bit more of a preliminary stage, but this is a joint training facility at our training center, some props that would be shared and programs that would be shared between the City of Fort Collins Utilities and PFA for technical rescue and hazardous situation training. And what we have in front of you today is an agreement that's been through the attorney to set up some expectations about what this relationship will look like going into the future, who pays for what, who has responsibility for what, and tried to envision what might happen in all the future stages of this development. What we're talking about right now is really only phase one and some very limited additional props, but an overall master plan for what the facility would look like. And if you remember when we talked about this before, this is on the west side of the training center where we've got some open ground that we use for various trainings and scenarios that we would really more fully develop that and make it useful to not only our employees, but to the utilities employees who need to do underground training in underground situations, high wire power lines, and a variety of things like that. So what we're here today is for you to help us with the next step, which is approving this memorandum of understanding between the city and PFA. And after that is done, then CSURF, who actually owns the land that we're on, CSU owns the land that the training center is on, needs to see that we've come to this agreement before they give their final blessing as well. So that's the next thing that comes after that. Brandon, do you have anything you want to add to that? Brandon was working on this in his previous job as the training center or training chief, even though he's now interim operations chief. So Brandon, do you have anything to add to that?
I would just add, and that's a good summary on that, is this came out of our strategic plan and part of our planning analysis out at the training center. And one of the things was to analyze our facilities and the needs and everything. And we presented this to you, hard to believe it was a year ago. And just due to COVID and all that stuff, it's taken us a little bit more time to get to this point and get the MOU constructed, agreed upon with us in the city. I think it's going to be critical, as you saw last week with Raphael, we actually do training with the forestry department, all that kind of stuff, establishing those relationships. So I think this is just going to be that next step and that next level, like we said, in that partnership with the city utilities and Poudre Fire, just continue building on it. I know for our crews that responded on that, it was good recognizing, hey, here's a person we have trained before. And it's just going to continue expanding upon that. And like you said, once we go through CSURF, we do have money that's designated to kind of get this thing kicked off, as does the city. And the city's going to probably benefit first thing because their plan is to put in the power poles and to get into the water infrastructure, also with the utility locates on that side of it. So any questions?
Mike, I have a couple of questions.
Okay, Dave.
The first is, I think that, or maybe this is just a comment, that this being phase one and the utility making an investment of about a couple $100,000, it seems like we're not only approving this phase one, but whatever might happen in the future, which we don't have any information on, or at least it hasn't been presented to us. So that's one thought. I'd like to hear some thoughts on it. And the second is, obviously our Poudre Fire boundary goes outside the city of Fort Collins, and I wondered if anybody had also approached REA or other utilities that might want to be a part of this. I wouldn't want to throw a wrench in this whole process, but it seems like, obviously Poudre Fire Authority is bigger than the city. So what are your thoughts on those two questions?
Go ahead.
So as far as future phases, those are all going to be subject to budget appropriations, both from us for PFA related facilities and from the city on their utility related infrastructure. So, you know, if what you're concerned about is that we're starting down a road that we can't stop, well, you know, there's a lot of decision points in the future about you know, whether we want to continue on a specific piece of infrastructure or prop. So it's not like this is the only decision that you'll have. I'd like Brandon to talk about the REA piece of it as well, and users beyond PFA and city utilities.
Yeah, I guess I'd add, you know, the vision is, you're absolutely right, Dave, is this would be, the hope is if we build it, they will come. And we already work with REA side of it in our large animal rescue, and have an agreement on that side of it with their boom trucks. I know with the city and REA, they also, from the light and power side of it, do things to support each other, especially like days like today when we get into potentially high arcing power lines. Understanding of how big this potentially could be and how it can really benefit this region, and talking to the city, and just with our thing is trying to keep it with our two entities right now. Obviously this property is in the county on that side of it, and there's just, it's going to be a process. And the idea is to let's start small within our group, that we can keep and understand, knowing this new relationship, we have to go through all these steps. We're already providing regional training for Poudre Fire Authority. I know for the city, they're doing it with their employees and being able to expand, that this is just going to be an opportunity, because right now city utilities doesn't have the training facility. They're training it as they identified, I think it was in 2016, when they identified the need for the training facility. And just to recap, they were going to a site just on the north side of the city of Loveland's city limits. And this just makes a lot of sense for them. And I think once we build this, it's all about bringing what we can for Northern Colorado, have the facilities. And it's just something that you don't see generally with the fire departments in city utilities, or like in the case with REA, XL, that kind of thing, is now we'll have a platform to actually begin that process. When you do regional classes, and kind of like we do now, is you kind of do the pay to play when you bring on a class. Or it could just be, you know, those line crews getting together that we have facility, and that's our partnership in which is the intent of us getting the land, is about, you know, public safety and having a place to train our first responders. And now in this case, it's just you know, the utilities department has a different use for these props, and that's to train their new workers, to keep up their skill sets and to expand their skill sets. Obviously for the maintenance on that side of it and building things, for us, it's rescue and understanding the facilities and the dangers and the hazards behind that, and how we can safely do that in a controlled atmosphere. That answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
And I would kind of dovetail on that. It's the regional approach and across those boundaries. And I've had this discussion with the board before. You know, and one of my beliefs is that a big, strong role of local government is not only public safety and the response side, but also community risk reduction. And risk reduction also applies to our responders, and a lot of the props and stuff that will be built in the world of utilities are things that, such as a trench rescue thing that we do now, or a vault, or any of those things that we're talking about, are things that we are going to respond to in conjunction with those folks. So, you know, Mike, coming from Fort Collins, Loveland water, there'll be opportunities for those regional things. And most of our outreach to those are going to be through our utility department, who already partners with them. So it's great opportunity. And I think that we've got a pretty good handle on that. And I really appreciate Chief Garcia's growth for that, keying on that.
It would probably make sense for us to go ahead with this, but also communicate to those other utilities. And Tom, you reminded me of the other water utilities as well. Electric, water, obviously gas isn't included, but Excel, we might want to notify people we have those. But we're putting that facility in, and that we would welcome their participation.
Yeah, this is getting us on the start to that.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions from the board? We'll entertain a motion then to adopt the agreement.
I don't have the resolution number, but I'll make a motion to approve the joint training facility with Fort Collins facilities.
And just so you all know, before you vote, Darren had to step out for another meeting that he had to attend.
I'll second it.
Motion and second. All those in favor of the approval of the agreement, say aye.
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 Thank
Motion
you much. We appreciate it. We'll keep you up to date on how it progresses.
Thank you.
This is a good move, Brandon and Ann. Thank you for your efforts in making this happen, because that's a good regional cooperative move, I think. So thanks again.
Yeah, it's really a personal passion for Brandon, and glad to see this day for him.
Yeah, good job. Okay, very good. I think we're all done with our action items, and we're ready to listen to the briefing papers from the chief and other staff members. Tom?
Well, what I will add on the briefing papers that you see, and that's the activities, is one of the things that Chief Garcia has discussed as well with him coming into this position is working with our battalion chief to come with a central messaging point. So I know that, especially going back to when Dick Rayner was on this board, is that this is a great way for the board to see what our people on the ground are doing. Show you that they are every day called to the task of what they do to practice their craft, and it's a great way to show the board how that's working. And we're working on centralizing that report into one central report rather than through the different shifts. And Chief Garcia is working on that for in the future. So I think that's going to be a great way to report that, in addition to the other stuff that are in the briefing papers. But it even is good for me to catch up on some of the calls that they've been running with the different extrications and fires and stuff. And as I said earlier, it's a great way for you on the board to see what they do each and every day.
Any board member have any questions regarding the briefing papers?
I do again. Sorry, Mike.
Hey, Dave, you go right ahead.
Hey, Tom and maybe Ann and Kirsten, on the dashboard for the revenues and expenses, we show 142,748 revenue, and it's 3.18%, but the dashboard doesn't tell us whether that's 3.18% above or below. And I think it might be useful or enhance our dashboard to say that. And the same thing with the expenses, and that's pretty obviously we're over 25.9%, right? So anyway, just some thoughts there for you to think about, okay?
I'll look into that, Dave. Yeah, thank you.
And maybe a good opportunity for a refresh on this report too. So we haven't had a refresh on it for a while. So maybe it's a good time to think if there's anything new that we could share, or maybe that's something we want to discuss with the next chief as well, of preferences on how we report this kind of information. But yeah, if we get to the point where we just look at it and it's
right, it's clear to you guys, obviously.
Right.
It's just a suggestion for the dashboard.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, two other comments. One is, and Tom, this goes back to the comment you continually make, is about the character of our firefighters. And I noted in there, I think it was the C shift did for Christmas toys to kids disadvantaged kids, and I thought that was really great. The other thing that struck me as I read through these reports with all the training going on and people moving around is that I think, Tom, you've put into place and or staffs put into place this awesome succession training plan. So if we have an opening, we've got somebody ready to jump right into it. So I certainly appreciate that.
Well, I'll comment on the latter first. We hire great people, and we have people who really are focused on professional development, and we are pretty intentional about our succession plan. As I say, right now today, we've got 12 individuals that are taking their captain's test, and that's that first line of supervision. And we have excellent candidates that are coming out of that, and we will be promoting some of them in February. The other thing about the outreach for the holiday gift giving, that's a department-wide thing that's
okay.
The local 1945 really keys on that. They even jumped in. They bought extra wrapping paper this year. They started a coat drive and got coats purchased for those kids as well. Also during the holidays, we have the Care and Compassion Fund that Chief Vandervelde started. So when our crews go out and someone needs, they need a water heater or whatever it might be, that rather than digging in their own pockets to replace that, they have a fund to go to. So over the holidays, we found someone who was not was down on their luck and needed tires for their car to be able to get to work, and the whole department just jumped in, and the Care and Compassion Fund was able to jump in and help that person who we encountered from a call. So we hire very compassionate people, and they're very driven by they're passionate about that compassion, and we're grateful for that. So I'm glad you saw that in there, Dave. That's why we like to get these reports to you. That we, as I like to say, we hire hearts, and we'll get them the skills to be firefighting, but they'll be firefighters. But we're really keyed on that heart.
Any other board discussion regarding the correspondence? Board member have anything else to come before the board? If not, then looks like we're through the agenda, so we'll call the meeting over. Thank you.
See y'all later.
See you all later. Bye.
Next, yep, bye.